As you know, during this time of the year, we love to find out what's happening in the big square building that's going to affect us. And actually, everything that happens in that big square building affects us. And joining us this morning from the minority is Beth Fukumoto, who is, for the first time, sitting in our legislative chair on the Mike Buck Show. Good morning. Nice to see you.
Good morning.
I first of all, we haven't been able to spend time together before like this in the past, so I want to welcome you here. But second of all, also want to get sort of an idea. I know that everybody has expectations when they get a new gig, and they know, and I just want to know what it's like, particularly with all the, I don't want to say wheeling dealing that we hear that goes on, but with all the yin and the yang in the legislature. Are you having fun? Is it tough to do? What's it like doing what you do?
I think I expected the legislative side of it, just being a representative, because I'd worked there before. I was the director of minority research. So I kind of knew the bills and all of that, but I did not realize what it would be like to be in leadership. Yeah. I did not expect to be in leadership my first term, and that's unusual. So I think there's been a higher learning curve than I expected to have.
You know what I think is important for us to learn, because you have a before-the-fact experience. I want to talk about how you and others rely on the work of staffers and people to help with this tremendous amount of material that you have to process every session. I mean, we look at all the bills, and yet I don't have to read the whole thing. I say this pertaining to this, and I think, oh, I like that or I don't like that. Right. But the volumes of stuff you must have to do, it must be amazing.
Well, we rely on our staff to be experts on the different committees. So we'll have people sitting in on every committee. As the director, I was responsible for all of those experts, if you will. So I had to sort of know what they were all doing and study all the bills myself. So as a representative, it's sort of the same. I have to study all the bills myself, or I feel like representatives should. They don't always, but they should. And then, we rely on staff to be able to tell us, explain how this particular thing will hurt a certain industry or help.
I know that there's always some accusations that staff is, family, cousins, friends, classmates. That shouldn't preclude somebody from being a staff member if they do it. Isn't it true that as a rep, you would say, all right, I'm responsible to my constituents. I better get some good advice, because who can do it all, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So funny you should mention that, because my sister actually works for the House Minority. I did not hire her, but she's been there for a while too. Yeah.
But I think that, in many respects, that's good.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that you know what to be expected. But it doesn't mean, isn't it true that the moment an election is done, there's a lot of expectation, whether it be from contributors, from financial contributors, from volunteers, that the number of appointments, there are a lot of them. And so you do kind of have to watch, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, now, that being said, let's talk about some of these specific things that maybe you've experienced, like when a crossover happens. What are some of the things that you have experienced that you can share with us?
Well, we just had crossover, and we're coming up on the next segment of the session. It's interesting because you end up reading a lot. It was sort of like being back in college. The minority leader and I just sort of sat in a room for 48 hours and just read 250 bills. It's a lot of work. I think people don't realize it's different being a representative, because it is your vote now. You're not just telling somebody how to vote. You're the one on record.
Sure.
So that was interesting. And it's interesting when you come up to the deadline, because that's when you see if things start falling through the cracks, what's going to pass, what's not going to pass. I appreciated the last crossover, because a lot of the taxes and fees that we thought were coming through ended up dying on the House side. And we ended up with a lot of bills that we liked. So I'm hoping the same thing happens this time.
Well, let me ask you this, because I know that one of the big things that we all worry about right now is the stuff they call gut and replace. We do know that there's many bills that have fallen by the wayside. And one in particular is the PLDC bill, where we're taking a look at that and saying, oh, breathe a big sigh of relief, it's gone. But there's some other bills that are bringing back portions of that. So does a red flag go up in your office, for instance, when you say, well, this is dead, but wait a minute, it might be a skeleton somewhere else?
Yeah, well, it certainly does with it can until the end of session. We always tell people things have this weird way of coming back to life. I think Governor Abercrombie might have said that at one point too in the legislature. So things do come back. I think with the PLDC in particular, the one thing that I would say sort of in defense of this new sort of PLDC that's coming up is that it's got a lot more public input. I think that was the major problem.
Yeah,
with
I
the
think
first one,
disclosure
but-
and openness and stuff
Yeah.
is important.
Yeah, and that was the big problem. That's why I objected to the first one.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like the Senate's playing some games with the repeal on the Senate side,
Yeah,
so I'm a little concerned about that. But on the House side right now, we have a smaller one that will only affect 4 different projects, and it's sort of a small test run to see how it works out, and I think that might be a better way to go.
Does it appear to you anyway that this new sort of phoenix rising out of the ashes might be a little bit more transparent, that if people really want to find something out, they can?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty important. Okay, now, before we go to our break, and by the way, you can join us. Beth Fukumoto, happy to talk to you. For those that don't know, your district is?
Mililani and Mililani Mauka.
Yep, where the choo-choo train's going to affect some of the traffic coming in from that area, so we'll talk about that. But what about the 800-pound gorilla? Everybody is, I don't know whether breathing a collective sigh of relief is the proper nomenclature to use or not, but I know there's been a big albatross on everybody's neck, and that has been the inability of the teachers union and the state to come to terms, and it looks like we have the semblance of a working agreement. Is this both a relief and a caution?
Yes, I think the teachers have been waiting for a long time for something.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, I've talked to a lot of them who are struggling, and I think that that's fair because of our high cost of living. I was disappointed with the governor not being able to fix that. But I think we need to be careful because we're going to have some demands from everybody for salary increases.
Sure.
Exempt, even people that are not in a union are going to be asking for salary increases. So I think we just need to be careful, make sure that we're being fiscally responsible. But I think we can do that and still make sure people get paid.
I think the interesting thing of this is when you take a look at this, just as Joe Average Citizen, I've been dealing with this since the moment the first murmur of we might strike or we don't like this or nearest best and final offer, is that it looks like they're getting what they were asking for in the first place. It just took them longer.
Yeah, it looks like they did. They're ending up to get what they needed.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But all of a sudden, this means the threat before or the last best and final offer is off the table because it wasn't. It is a change. Do you think, as an individual, was it inevitable that we have to do this just because everybody deserves to get paid a little more than they're getting paid?
I supported higher salaries for teachers, so I'm actually glad with what went through.
Okay, now when we come back after a break, we're going to think of some of the ways that there might be some sneaky things coming around to fund this. How are we going to pay for this? 7:15 is the time. Rep. Beth Fukumoto's in the house. Okay, we are back. It's 18 minutes after the hour. And we're able to spend some quality time with Beth Fukumoto this morning from the State House of Representatives. I was teasing before the thing, for those of you who didn't know, her area of Mililani, the Mililani area. And, before we go back into things, let's talk about, you have constituents. And I think that a lot of us have been lulled into a false sense of security about the rail's no good or the rail is good. Mm-hmm. And I do know that people in your area are going to be the most affected by whatever mode of mass transit there is. How big of a day was that for you in the campaigning? And since then, how often does the subject of rail come up?
People ask me a lot about rail, particularly because they supported it. I think Caldwell did very well in my district. I think, I'm concerned about the costs still, but now that it's moving forward, I think it's somewhat of a moot point whether or not everybody agrees or doesn't agree. I mean, the majority of Hawaii said that they wanted it, or majority of Oahu, at least. What
about those that are saying, we were guaranteed a lot of federal money, and everyone knows the Fed's going through some pretty tough fiscal times, and although they say, we've just had an example of some money that we expected not coming. Right. What are we going to do if we don't get that money?
I mean, I think that's going to be the one caveat. We're going to have to be able to pay for it. Yeah. Unfortunately, I mean, there's all sorts of things that can happen. I don't support another GET increase. That's one of the lines I would have to draw. You know what, Beth? Everybody is sitting on the edge of their seat, and so far it looks like, when you take a look at all the materials that are out there, that at least this session, the GET has escaped. Yeah. Yeah, but everybody knows there could be some 11th hour, 12th hour deal to upset that. How do we convey? How do we find out about that? We got to rely on you guys, right? Right. Yeah, to tell us what's up. Right. Yeah. Well, 38 Democrats in the House signed a pledge before the last election stating that they would not increase the GET. Yeah. Now, my all personal of them, thanks to all 38 of them. Yeah. Well, all of them voted for it on second reading. Yeah. So, you never know. But they did all say that they would not pass one. So hopefully it doesn't come back up.
I know that some of the things that always come up are our need for additional revenues and more creative ways to get them. And I'm kind of worried that, for instance, we didn't have an increase in the soda. This soda tax didn't happen. But there are other things that are out there that are lurking. What are some of the things that you have become aware of and can call our attention to that might look like being harmless enough, but actually might be a problem?
We have a lot of, what it is it's a lot of fees, things that are going to go under the radar. We have one called the portable electronics insurance, which would be basically the insurance for a cell phone. It went through last year, and last year they were asking for, it was $2,500 for a renewal and $5,000 for the initial license to be able to sell this insurance. Because we made such a big deal out of it as Republicans last year, they cut it down to about $100, but it's going back up again to $5,000.
What is that fee? What does that do for me?
It doesn't do anything. What it does is it probably stops people from getting into the market, the insurance market, so portable electronics. But I guess what they're counting on is that it's not something that's massive like a GET, so nobody notices it, but it's something that will keep insurance prices higher probably. How
do you in the legislature keep pace with technology? Because we got to a point where the changes are so rapid that the device that you had yesterday is history. I was teasing earlier before you got here about this post office business. Hey, why should we even mail Social Security checks? They don't want to. They want them to go into your account. How much do you have to take into account as a legislator when you guys are looking down the road 20 or 30 years? We have no idea what's out there technology-wise and how it's going to change us.
It's tough. I mean, even this year we're just trying to go paperless, and the Senate's been paperless for a while, and the House is having a lot of trouble because we have people from all different walks of life, and we have all different kinds of testifiers coming in who have different experiences. So I think part of government sometimes moving slowly on technology is making sure that everybody's on board, because that's our responsibility. So it's interesting trying to keep pace. We have a reputation here of being business unfriendly. Yeah. And I do know that there are a number of internet providers and a number of other things that we have even though the providers are trying as best they can, here in Hawaii, we're not exactly the quickest, most up to speed on the internet, and yet the governor talks about how we're trying to embrace this technology. In your opinion, and maybe in the minority's opinion, if you can speak for them, are we addressing the real needs of staying abreast with technology here? I think improving broadband would be great. That's what we need to do. Critical? Yeah. It's super important, and we haven't been addressing it the past couple of years. We keep sort of deferring the bills and killing them in the end. So hopefully something goes through this year that will help. I do think that some of the governor's technology transformation is a good thing because it'll get businesses, things moving faster in government, help permitting and all that move faster. But we did cut him back significantly in the House budget because we did think he was asking for a bit too much. Sure. Well, what about we're talking about something that's coming up this week, and that is the rethinking or the reuse about public lands and particularly those that surround schools. I mean, what we can do. And I know that's been an area of let's really, really take a look at this before we make a commitment. What bills are still alive that might affect school properties being used for other things? I wish I had the House bill and the Senate bill numbers in front of me, but I don't. But there is one coming up Wednesday morning. The Finance Committee will be hearing it at 9 a.m. And that is the Public School Redevelopment 21st Century Schools. Right. It's a governor's initiative. I actually, I can't speak for the whole minority here because we have very different opinions, but I actually support it. I think that anything that we can do to try to better utilize our school lands is good because we have such horrible schools in some places. To nobody's fault. I mean, I guess it's the government's fault, but not the teachers or the students or anybody. But we haven't been fixing them like we should. And I think, anything that we can do to help use those properties. But of course, if you're Jean Ward, you feel very differently, or Cynthia Thielen and some of these others. But I think for my district, I think we'd rather have that. There may be a reason why in your district there aren't as many old schools. That's right. I mean, you have an area that is growing in population. You probably have. I mean, I'm from Jean Ward's district, so we have a population that's, I want to say, gracefully aging. And it is perceived that Hawaii Kai, you can't. Young kids can't grow up in Hawaii Kai; it's too expensive. And yet, I drive by schools every day in Hawaii Kai that are full of little kids. Yes. So I think that is a dilemma, and that must make it interesting for you and for others.
when you get in one room to say, well, I bring a different set of needs to
Right.
the party than you do.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I joked with Gene Ward multiple times because we need the schools in my district.
Sure.
But yeah, it's interesting, and I think that's what's great about the Minority Caucus is we all come from very different perspectives. We can talk about different things sometimes on the floor, contradictory, but it's sort of we're allowed to we bring a lot of diverse perspectives, which I think is good.
One thing that is crossing a lot of lines, and that is the ongoing confusion between city and state. Who's a state park? What's a city park? What's a state road? We've seen this, I want to say, expose of potholia over the weekend and contributing today. And I know that that's a big part of the thing, the changing infrastructure. One thing that needs to be explained, that some of these things can be done by creating an opportunity for people to become part of the financial success, like through a bond movement. What's going on that is going to affect the big story this morning is highways and on a bigger picture, infrastructure in general.
Well, I think one of the things that the legislature needs to stop raiding the highway fund. That's been part of the problem over the years. Is we took something like $12 million out of it. I think it was in 2008. So that's all money that should have been going to a highway transformation project all along. Now we're starting to do that now. The project is starting now, but it should be interesting to see how it goes through. And I think we need to reassess the way we're even doing things like filling potholes.
One would say that, and John Public, like me, has to be told, look, I know that we have a city Department of Transportation and a state. And I know that the reason why has been said that the state Department of Transportation is responsible to the federal government guidelines, and we need to do this and we need to do that. What about an exemption, or what about a waiver for a little place like Hawaii, so far away from everything, saying, look, why do we have one maintenance department instead of two? Why do we have one parks department instead of two? I know that comes up all the time. Nothing happens, though.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that would have to happen on a federal level. I think that's something we got to talk to our congressional delegation about. But it would be a good idea to be able to consolidate. I think one of the things that I do in my district to make up for that, I just sent out a postcard recently telling people when the potholes and everything will be filled. That's not my job. I'm a state representative. That's a city job. But the more we can do to push information out and act as one team, the better. And I think we haven't done that well in the past.
I'm thinking that sometimes if you take a look at experience like maybe from an older area, that sometimes it's maybe more advisable to say, well, what does a growing area need? Because that's the reality, right? I mean, you guys need more this and more that. Unfortunately, or fortunately for you guys, but unfortunately for those that say East Oahu, is that our roads are really old, and a lot of yours aren't that old yet. So maybe sometimes you don't understand as a rep how bad it is to drive up Little Home Road. Because maybe your own street's not so bad. So talk about how interaction with your contemporaries, with your peers, is important, because you might get your eye opened about post offices or schools or roads.
Right. Well, I think part of what's been helpful for me personally is that I was Gene Ward's office manager. So I dealt with the Luna Home Road issues and all of that, filling all the potholes. And it's hard for us to balance it because, like you said, we have a growing area, so we have less problems probably than Hawaii Kai. But we also have more people driving on the roads.
They're coming, because you got more people using those roads, right? All right, we got more with Beth Fukumoto right after our news break. You can join us at 296 KHNR. We now have phone lines open. I'm getting some email, but as you know, we don't respond to email when we have a newsmaker in the studio. If you want to ask Beth a question about your district or about any particular bill or about things in general, the number is 296 KHNR. That's 296-5467. We pause for a little bit of a news break, and when we come back, we'll have more with Rep. Beth Fukumoto and you on KHNR Hawaii's Intelligent Talk, where it's exactly 7:30 on a Monday back-to-work morning. Welcome back. Don't forget, in the 8 o'clock hour, a little later on, we have a very, very special deal for you. It's part of our HawaiiSalem.com half-price deals. This is like way less than half price. D&M Satellite Solutions, $1,060 worth of satellite delivery for just $250. You're going to have to look at that. We're also taking a look through the eyes of Beth Fukumoto of the House of Representatives. Here, she is a member of the minority party, and struggling through an interesting session. I don't want to say struggling through, but I guess maybe people don't understand that as tough as it is, Beth, you guys all have to wake up in the morning and say, "Oh boy, I better put on my A game today because it's getting down to crunch time." Is there that feeling of a little pressure of, hey, chatting and everything, it's done. Let's get working.
Definitely. Yeah. I think in the next week and a half, finance at the House is going to have to hear every bill that's going to pass. So we'll see a lot of those bills like early childhood education and some of the other ones that people are watching really closely are going to have to move or not move this week. So. And
you know what? We're going to talk about specifically some of those. But if you've got a question and you'd like it answered, you call 296-5467 or 296-KHNR. We can find out, change the subject a little bit, but go out to John in town with a question for Beth, and those of you that are on the phone and ringing, we'll get right to you too. Good morning, John.
Yes, sir. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
My question to Representative Fukumoto is that the state has passed a bill where all private security guard companies, their employees have to meet certain criteria, like they have to re-register, they have to take retraining, they have to show proof of high school diploma. They have to be fingerprinted. That I can all understand. But they're also requiring that these employees be registered with the State Department. I think it's like private security guard, some type private security guard company. But they're asking for a $130 fee to register with the state. How did the state come up with that figure of $130?
I'm actually not very familiar with the bill that you're referencing. But most of the fees that we come up with are coming from testimony from the department. So it's something that the department suggested that might be a good idea, or from the industry saying, well, this is what we can pay for. Normally it's a mix of the two, but I've seen fees change depending on the testimony that comes in. So I'd suggest if you are concerned with the fee, make sure that you submit testimony the next time the bill is going to be heard.
Now, John, let me ask you a question. Did you say that was... you're talking about private security guards, or you're talking about the security guards that were charged with the responsibility of moving the prisoners around and their list of qualifications before they got that job?
No, sir. This private security guard company, because I got a letter from my company.
I get you. That's
stating that if we don't complete all of the requirements by July 31st, we cannot work as a security guard in the state. And most of it, I can understand the retraining, the checking for felonies, fingerprinting, and stuff like that, but there is a state agency that's been in existence for 7 years. I don't know if the bill, I can't remember, I don't want to convolute what I'm saying, but I think it was Bill 203 or 208 or something like that, but it has been passed. And these are the things that we do have to do. I just have a problem with the $130. Mm-hmm. The company, at least my company, is saying that they will not reimburse but help with persons who can't pay, by maybe paying them back, paying the company back so much out of their paycheck.
Okay, well, let me open it because I think what Beth's suggestion was a good one, and that is the next time you hear it. But this guy sounds like he's on it. He knows that he knows what to respond to. But I think maybe more importantly would be that when that sort of thing happens, that somebody takes a look and say, "What do you mean these people aren't qualified to do that?" In other words, we better go backwards and change things and make it so that somebody with that amount of responsibility is qualified to have it.
Right.
Whether it be background checks or whatever, right?
Right. I think actually if it's already moving through and your company's already told you that that's moving through, then it could possibly have already passed, maybe in a previous session. Okay,
let's go to Don, our friend in Kaneohe next. Join us. Good morning, Don.
Morning. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
Yes, Beth. Yesterday I attended the 442nd 70th anniversary reunion, and it was a great tribute to the late Senator Daniel Inouye, and they mentioned about his wife was talking about how the third generation or people with Japanese descent should participate by going to politics and whatnot. I'm very intrigued about you going into politics as a Republican, and I commend you for doing that because it's a different type of time now for the Republican Party compared to what the Democrats are doing.
Yeah,
I commend you for that. And I want to know if somebody was talking about you folks might give an award today for the 442nd at the legislation.
Yes, we're presenting an award during the floor session at noon. I'm going to be presenting a lei, I believe.
And then the Senate also is going to do one too. All right. Do you know what time?
The Senate should be at 11:30.
11:30.
Yeah.
In the chambers. Okay. And I was wondering, today marks the 13th year that my father passed away in that tragic accident at the Sheraton Hotel at the 442 reunion when he got run over.
Oh, yeah, Don, you know, for those that don't, we shared this grief with Don a long time ago. Everybody remembers that there was an accident, a motor vehicle accident involving a couple of guys from the 442nd, and one ran into the other, and it was indeed a real tragedy. And Don, I can't believe that it was 13 years ago. It seemed like it was only yesterday, and I'm sure it's a bitter reminder for you every year that this happens.
Yeah, everybody came up to us because they remembered that at the reunion.
Yeah, I bet.
I have a question for Beth concerning people who are elderly and are still driving, because the person that ran them over was a fellow veteran, and he was elderly, but he hit the wrong pedal. I was wondering, would there be any legislation to see if the elderly would be, I don't want them cigarette, but maybe better check their reflexes on when they drive?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it's very, I hear a lot of accidents now. People get into accidents because they hit the wrong pedal and they're kind of elderly. I know they have some things for the young, but I'm not too sure about the elderly.
Yeah, that's great. And Don, thanks so much for that call and for joining us. Beth, I know that that's a touchy area because it is when you start taking away people's rights or privileges or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. But talk about how that would be even a legislative issue. In other words, it is obviously a county issue, and it is an agent in place issue. And yet we know when we get our driver's license, we pay the county, but the state gets the money.
Right.
And when we pay a ticket, and the state gets the money. Where are we with that? Because I know it came up this year because of these kind of accidents.
There's a gap age where if you get it, and I believe it's 79, but I'd have to check the age. But if you get it at a certain point, you get the like maybe 6 years or
so many years before renewal.
Right,
yeah.
and if you get it the next year, it's every 2 years. So fixing that gap is one of the things that we can do to make sure that once you get a certain age that you're getting checked enough. I'd say maybe that's probably something we should look at for younger people too.
But I was going to say that should affect us all. And I can tell you, and I remember, and I'm sure that there are many out there that remember, the renewal procedure used to be, and the renewal window used to be considerably different. I think that for cost and other reasons over the years, we've extended it out year and year to say, but we may have made a mistake and said, maybe 6 years for anybody is too long.
Yeah, I think so.
Let's talk about just somebody that maybe works outside and gets an eye condition from the sun.
Yep.
In 6 years, they could literally not be able to see, right? Mm-hmm. Yet we have this deal where the medical science is keeping us alive a lot longer, and so we want to drive around a lot longer. Is there anything still alive on that this year?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. Very interesting. It's 7:43. Beth Fukumoto is our special guest this morning, and we're talking about those things that have crossed over. And I get a chance to ask everybody at this time how they prefer to hear from their constituents or from others. You're part of the new age, new wave. Text me and all of that kind of stuff. But let's talk about the importance of how your office gauges response from your constituents.
I like emails.
Yeah.
That's my favorite because I can, reply to them quickly. I can do it by myself.
Yeah.
Right there. If phone calls, often I'm not the one taking the call.
Sure.
So I'd rather see the emails. I get it. It comes right to my phone. So.
And somebody's already asked off the air, how do I email Beth?
Okay, it's Rep Fukumoto at capital.hawaii.gov.
That's pretty easy. All right. Now, that being said, we've asked you some of the big picture stuff. Let's talk about some of the stuff that's important. After a short little break, I want to ask you, what are some of your pet projects? What are some of the things that you care about? And what sort of reaction you've been getting to those? And, what people can do to get behind you a little bit. 7:45, Mililani More with traffic. We got it all. KHNR as we continue at 296 KHNR, 296-5467. Some of you recognize that from our fishing program called Go Fish. Called Fishing in the Dark.
The only time I'll get up early.
Well, sometimes it seems like we're all in the dark.
Is to meet my mules at the fishing hole.
And we're talking to our Representative Beth Fukumoto from the Mililani area. As we get down to the nitty-gritty of the legislative session here in 2013, there's still plenty of time. There's still plenty of stuff that is really important. And if you've got something that is important to you and you want to talk to Rep Fukumoto, now's your chance at 296-KHNR or 296-5467. But that usually at this time of our program, I try to thank our guests by saying, Okay, if you could drive the bus for the rest of the show, what would you do? And I know one thing that is dear to Beth because I asked her off the air, and I want to continue on this because I think it's important to all of us. And it's this great unknown quantity about our educational system. We know that we talked earlier, Beth, about it looks like the HSTA and the administration has come to some sort of agreement with regards to the contract for teachers, but the big real 800-pound elephant is all about how early we can get to our kids. And I know that early education is of key import to you. Where are we going, and are we going in the right direction?
Well, I'm first of all a big supporter of preschools. My community.
By the way, just a caveat: your community is loaded up with a lot of young marrieds with kids that need to go to preschool.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's
okay,
right.
yeah.
So right now, Mililani Mauka is attending preschool at about 80% rate.
Which is pretty good, right?
High above.
Very high.
I mean, I think Hawaii is under 50%. And Mililani Townside, which is an older community, is still attending at about 70% rate, still very high. All private preschools. We have a ton of private preschools in Mililani. My concern with these bills, initially I thought that perhaps it was a good idea to put through some measures that would increase early learning funding on account of, if we put in $1, we get back $4 in our educational system.
Which is impressive, by the way.
Right.
There's very few investments that will return like that.
Right.
Yeah.
We can cut back on special ed. We can cut back on a few other things because we will have less people in those programs. I think it's a great thing for kids. However, my concern currently with this measure is that it would exempt, it would not allow religious preschools to participate. So the Hongwanjis, the Catholic preschools cannot participate. And that's something that the governor is now telling people, it's because our Constitution doesn't allow it and all these other things, which perhaps is true. But we currently have state funds going through the Open Doors program, which DHS administers. And that's a preschool program, and that's money that goes directly towards religious schools. So for people that cannot pay for these schools, they get a state subsidy to pay.
You know what? I think, and maybe your opinion on this matters a lot, and that is, I'm wondering if the general public, I'm not talking about people that either know somebody or have children or grandchildren in a private preschool, know what a load they carry. And in other words, if they all went away,
right?
That in your neighborhood, that percentage of 80 would go down to 30.
Oh yeah.
I mean, because I would imagine a huge number of those are struggling young. I don't make much money, but I'm doing what I love to do, preschool places.
Yeah, and what's the concern with this is that those preschools then, if they're not receiving government money anymore, even if they only receive Open Doors money, which they have now, the governor can change. They're concerned because they're worried the governor's going to then change the rules on them, and they can't even receive that Open Doors money anymore. So this is a great preschool program that's getting kids to preschool that we could put more money into and do it that way, but he's not doing that because he wants to get rid of the religious schools. I'm
kind of concerned about this as well. The ability of the 20% in your area that are not going to preschool, how does it hamper their preparation when they get, every now and again somebody will say, my grandson, boy, this kid's like 1 and he can he can play a clarinet and he can read and he's writing a book. I mean, sometimes our kids get thrown into a classroom with kids that are like way ahead of them because of preschool.
Right.
I don't know if parents or grandparents know how critical this is, how under prepared somebody that doesn't have early childhood education is.
Right. And significantly underprepared. I can see the concern with getting to kids too soon, and that's what people are, concerned with government taking hold of their children too soon. But if we're going to private schools, that's great, but Governor Abercrombie's not letting that happen.
Yeah. Okay, so that being said, what is still surviving, or what is still being deliberated as far as the number of bills? Is it down to 1 or 2 bills in each division now?
Well, it's actually there are 3 bills left. It's on the House side only, so the Senate doesn't have them, and we have to decide whether or not to hear them this week.
Gotcha.
So this would be the opportunity to put in testimony. The big thing is a lot of the religious preschools are not speaking up, and behind the scenes they've told me that they're concerned that if they do, Governor Abercrombie's going to punish them and take away what they have now.
How significant would that be?
They would close. The schools would close.
That's the dilemma, folks, that I wanted maybe that Beth could really tell you, that this is a much bigger problem, and I'm very worried that when people don't speak up because they fear reprisal, that the public never really finds out what's really going on.
Right.
Yeah.
So parents that send their kids to those schools, they could speak up. It's just the preschools themselves are having trouble. So I think maybe standing up for those preschools is something people can do now. And then standing up for, our HSTA teachers the state got rid of junior kindergarten because Governor Abercrombie didn't want to pay the teachers through HSTA. So, there are multiple things that he has done that I think are not good for our young children. And I think we all need to speak up.
In the moments that we have left, I want to talk about that a little bit more because I know there's a collective sigh of relief throughout the community now that, okay, there is a deal, because I'm worried that a lot of parents and a lot of kids were at the tail end of the dog getting wagged about teachers that didn't want to wear a T-shirt or didn't want to protest or didn't want to go out and picket, had to do that because they didn't have a choice. Is there a undercurrent or a gut feeling that this probably will be ratified? It looks like Will Okabe has said, we think this is going to work. Will it work, do you think, Beth?
I think so. I think especially the health premiums was a huge thing that they're getting. Yeah. They really wanted
it. Now that being said, so you're carrying the torch for early childhood education. We've got a regular that always wants to know about this, and that is Alan out in Lanikai. Hopefully, Alan, we can get to this in the very, very limited amount of time we've got remaining. Your question or comment about natural gas, and I don't want to comment. I'd much rather have a question from you, Alan.
Okay. I just wanted to say thank you to Vice Speaker Mizuo and Gene Ward for introducing a resolution that would asking the Congress to allow somebody in Hawaii to purchase a couple of tankers to bring in liquid natural gas for Oahu. This would cut our electric utility bills in half and would be a tremendous improvement in the environment.
Okay, now I'm well aware of that position that you have, Alan, and I appreciate providing the forum for you, but I really want, rather than a statement, a question. Do you have one for Beth Fukumoto?
No, well, I just wanted to thank Mizuo and Ward.
Okay, but what about for Beth Fukumoto?
I don't have a specific question.
Oh, okay. Thanks very much for your call. Let's talk about that a little bit. We have a big challenge here, and that is in all of the different yin and yang and push and pull. Are we getting somewhere with being able to live with the mandate that we have as a legislature, that you have as a representative, of getting free of more fossil fuel?
Yeah, I think some would argue that natural gas is a fossil fuel. So that's part of the concern at the legislature now. It's a cleaner fuel. Yeah. So I think I support natural gas. I think we do need to bring it in, and it looks like we're moving forward with that, actually. Yeah. I
know that there's been a tremendous awareness in the solar credits. Let's talk about that, because I think that, and I'm sure that Alan and many others in the energy business would agree, that no matter what it is, if there's a credit out there, it should be looked at. Is there a concern of the legislator that there are some companies profiteering from credits?
There is. There's concern. I think, people seem to agree that we need to dial it back a little bit. I think we've gone too far. The state under Abercrombie has taken it too far. So I think we want to make sure that some of those credits are still there for people, because we're not there yet. We're not on 70% clean energy like we want it to be. Yeah. But is it still? Is there an undercurrent or a feeling or a thought that is there going to have to be last minute desperation efforts at creating legislation to make sure that we fit the mandate? And if we miss it, what's the penalty? It doesn't seem like there is one. No, there is no penalty.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks like we're trying to get there, but there's so many different opinions on how.
Do you remember in the very beginning, and I know this because you probably were doing in the earlier part of your career some serious research in this area, whether or not it was even realistic to think that mandate could work, because every expert said it was, that we could do it. If we collectively worked together between solar, wind, geothermal, natural gas, blah, 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 we could help.
Yeah. Maybe it would have been if we had incentivized a little bit more. Yeah. I think part of we've been taxing too much, and I think that's cut people back. Taxing oil at super high rates just to try to get to this has not been getting us there. So I think maybe trying a different approach, we could have done it, but it doesn't look like it's going there now.
Okay, when you talk about that taxing and everything, we're looking at the county level an effort by the mayor to affix a tax, which was defeated. But from what I understand, there still are a couple of measures alive in the House that could increase the gas tax.
Yep. We notice that. I mean, we have a lot of people that if it's a tax for the environment, it's going through no matter what, and they're going to vote yes no matter what. For me, I think my constituents want lower energy prices and lower gas prices, and that's all they care about right now. I mean, Mililani actually has a lot of solar and a lot of PV, but we also want lower gas prices. So
it isn't. You actually bring a refreshing look at it, because I think that I look at your constituents maybe more than in my neck of the woods as being people that are really hungry birds in a nest. That they just want they want Beth to bring home the worm every day, right?
Right.
Hey, thanks a lot for joining us. And once again, it's going to be nice today. You get to be part of the ceremony for the folks in the 442nd.
Yeah.
Rep Beth Fukumoto. We'll be back with more of the Mike Buck Show right after news break. Hawaii, it is 8 o'clock on Monday morning. Thanks for being here.